Welcome back to Access Houston on 97.9 The Box.
Good Sunday morning. You're listening to Access Houston. I'm your host, KG Smooth. Welcoming back. We haven't done this in a very long time. I'm so excited that the Access Houston Roundtable is back, and we got a fresh group of folks. First, I want to, I'm going to have everybody else introduce themselves so they can give their direct titles. Because Genesis, I don't know your correct title, what you're going by, Professor.
Today we'll go by the Raptivist. It's the Raptivist Genesis Blue here, live and full effect.
Hey.
This is Daniel Cohen, founder and chair of Indivisible Houston.
Nice. And Professor Schwartz.
That's right, Professor Schwartz. Or just plain Sherridan when I'm off duty. Hit me up. I'm the Prof. Schwartz.
Welcome to the program. I shout out to Sam Blair on air for lighting the fire, letting me get this back going. And so let's talk about some things. A lot has been going on. Is there anything in particular somebody want to tackle first? Because I could really start it off with what I want, but we would be on that for a while. So I'm gonna let one of you all take it first. Professor Schwartz. Oh, Professor Schwartz, I understand that there's something very important that you would like to talk about, especially since with Hurricane Florence that has just hit the Carolinas. We, who will be recovering from Hurricane Harvey for quite some time, you're wondering if Black and brown people are receiving the resources, the proper resources after Hurricane Harvey. I think that that is a valid question.
It's a question I think some of our elected officials, some of our community stakeholders, some of our supposed caretakers may not be comfortable with, but we need to ask it.
Yeah.
The old folks used to say, a storm is coming. And I think we're seeing that. I think we're feeling that. I think we are in the midst of a storm of a type.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I believe that, like everything else, when a storm comes, we're not the first to be rescued, we're not the first to be remembered, and we're not the first to be restored. That's my belief. I stand by that, and I wonder when that is going to change. I wonder when we're going to realize that if those people on the Superdome roof and Katrina would have perhaps looked different, maybe the response would have been different. I wonder, does it have to be people in Connecticut and Long Island, as a case of Superstorm Sandy, that are in peril, that the nation has to care more so when there's people who are black, brown, beige, caramel? So, yeah, I've got some questions about that because I believe a storm is coming.
You know, we here on 97 Out of the Box, we've been, we're about to give away a home. Teamed up with Boss Life Construction. Shout out to Slim Thug, Godsey Martin, Justin Martin of IJustGotHit.com. And on the interviewing process with interviewing the contestants who signed up to try to win this home, I was assigned to go to two of the contestants' houses. Like, this is during the kind of like the final stages of the interviewing process. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into because these two particular, and I'm sure that there were, hundreds of others, their stories were just so heavy, for one guy who was is a Marine, and he was helping the people in his neighborhood. And what was so fascinating, and I knew that he wasn't, being exaggerating or being hyperbole about it. He kept saying, so I swam from here, and then I swam across the street to get them, and then something else happened, and I swam over here, and like he literally, he swam. He had fins. He put them on and was trying to help save his neighbors and his pets. And then the other young lady, well, I mean, she's an elder, but, we call them young ladies. She had been done so dirty by a so-called government agency who came to what they said they were going to fix her house because her house kind of shifted with all of the rain and the flooding. And so they came and gutted out the cabinets and did something to her wall and then put all the stuff out on her lawn. Now she owns her property, and they just left it. And so then she said, the city of Houston said, well, if you don't get the sun, we're going to fine you. And she was like, well, I didn't do this. This government agency, did this. And so she was trying to get in touch with them so they can come and finish up, what they had done. And then they told her that the program was over.
Yeah. A lot of stories like that. Did y'all hear the story recently that I think it was $10 million or something? That was FEMA money is now being used for
diverted was the term they used. Diverted sounds so much better than
diverted to detention centers when all these people, as she said, are suffering. So you're absolutely right. We have to ask the questions. We have to put them on Front Street because they'll sneak it by us because you haven't really heard much about that story anymore. It was sort of a tweet blowing in the wind, and now we don't hear about it.
So. Yeah, it's definitely the way that we have the conversation too surrounding Harvey is so funny. Like funny odd, not funny comedy, right? But it's just it's almost positioned like if any money is allotted toward Harvey programs and you ask the question, is this being equitably distributed or not? Like if you oppose the way it's being done, or even if you just question it a little bit or anything, suddenly it's like you were pro Harvey. Like what are you, pro hurricane? You don't want to, you're against this funding. And so it puts everything kind of on our heels, I think, to your point, that whether or not something's being equitably distributed, whether or not there's equitable funding, whether or not people in River Oaks are getting made whole versus people out in the Lakewood neighborhood are being made whole it's a question that we have to keep asking. There wasn't a lot of debate over the bond at the end of the day. The county bond is, it's 85-15, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's it's always worth a deeper look. I'd like to see these community boards, instead of them coming up with a plan and then having 25 public meetings to go out and sell the plan, it would be nice if they had an actual community board that actually had some cross-section of members from the community involved who weren't the usual suspects, developers, union, government officials, like whoever it might be. But I think we have a lot of advocacy left to do to make that happen.
Yeah, because it's going to take a while before everything to really come back to normal.
And I think we're in a climate now where the haves and the have-nots it's so acute. The disparities are acute. So if we look at what happened in New Jersey, where they decided to punish an entire community because the mayor was in fact of a different party than the governor at the time and the governor's top administration, they punished an entire city by shutting down the bridge, or as we call it, Bridgegate.
Yeah.
Then we find out that the administration may not have been taking such a nuanced view of the damage here in Harvey, particularly because of who our mayor is, of the party of our mayor, or the color of our mayor's skin, as opposed to other communities that were represented by people that they felt were more in line with their policies. It's a frightening thought when, in fact, our federal government moved so much money to the state level. They moved it to the control of Austin, where they felt like there was more alignment. And we're talking about billions of dollars in federal aid being controlled by Austin, which mercifully did not suffer the damage we did. So instead of having that money moved here, where it could be put boots on the ground, as they like to say, and put in the hands of people who need the recovery, we see that it's being aligned politically. And then we hear words like diverted for need. Right. And then we can show them need, but is there anyone who wants to see that need? And I think Daniel's absolutely right. I think we need to be really, really clear on how stakeholders may or may not necessarily represent the interests of the person on the street. The person on the street is too busy trying to get a roof over his or her head, may not have the time to attend 24 meetings about a bond. Amazingly enough, we can pass bonds in this state to build prisons easier than we can for bonds to repair our infrastructure. But that's another story for another day. But we have to be really clear about where we are as a community in the recovery when we're fighting on multiple fronts.
Yeah. listen to Access Houston. It's the Access Houston Roundtable. Let's talk about this Dallas shooting real quick. The most bizarre. Well, let me not use the adjective bizarre because I know what it is. It really is some BS, and I just cannot wrap my head around it. The gentleman who was shot, Botham Jean.
I think we're going with Botham Jean.
Yeah, Jean, we say. John, it would be.
John.
But here, we say Jean here, and rest in peace to that brother.
Yeah, in his home, and this police officer who had just got off work alleges that she got off on the wrong floor and went into the apartment and had a command and shot the man. I just don't buy it. I just do not buy it. Like even if you are that tired and you get off on the wrong floor, once you try to put the key in and it doesn't work, or you look up and you see the apartment number,
right,
and the floors are marked. My friends and colleagues in Dallas, reached out to me and said there's so much clearly more to this story than they want to share with us. I was disappointed that they decided not to release her name for 4 days to give her time to get her effects. And they said, give her time to get her ducks in a row, to get her affairs in order. Where was the 4 days that he had? I don't believe that we're seeing any transparency here. I really am concerned when you look at the apartment complex, each floor is marked. When you look at where she would have to have parked, where she would have had to walk in, and the way that they have hotel-style keys that are green and red. So it's not like a key you can stick just in the lock. I mean, there's so many stories here. The bright red doormat, which has now been turned into a memorial, would have been another clue that she wasn't in her home. I don't know how far you have to walk into a house and not know it's not your house. Just things about this story don't add up. But what I wonder is, had he, as a man of color, come home and walked into the wrong apartment and shot a young petite, and a white woman who would be seen as defenseless, how long would it have taken for them? Would they have given him?
He wouldn't have made it out of there, right?
Would have been a murder one.
Would it have been murder one? Would they have given him time to get himself together?
No.
I would be really, really wrong if I said that I believe that the story is in any way aligned with what she said, because unfortunately there's a long history in that police department and some others of not giving people of color the same regard. And when you don't give the same value to people's lives, then you tend to be able to gloss over some of the facts on how their lives ended. But we know this man did what everyone says you're supposed to do. He got an education. He worked himself up. He got an internship, got a corporate job. Ironically, as a risk manager, a job where your job is to help clients minimize risk, and for him to come to an untimely end in his own home, I don't believe the man was doing anything other than trying to live his life. And where is our American dream and the promise that they have made when we can't be in our own homes? It's not wrong place, wrong time. And he wasn't a gangbanger.
It's disturbing. They've released something about him having marijuana in his home.
Weed in his home. Yeah. What does that have to do with the price of tea in China?
First of all, I need to see a toxicology report for her.
For her. How about that?
Because that's the only thing that would make any kind of sense, that you had to be high or drunk,
delusional,
or something. So you had to push the floor you went to, then you had to get off on that floor, then you had to go to the wrong door. So you took several wrongs. It wasn't just, I just went to this door and I was there. That's not even possible. Like, stop. But you found marijuana on him, but we haven't found out anything about her. Give me a break.
Why was it, and the fact that they chose to search his apartment to try to find.
What does that have to do with anything?
Searching his apartment to try to find answers. What answers do we need?
The man was at his house. I'm like, man, you just can't lose. I mean,
do we believe that in fact people trying to help set up an alibi for one of their colleagues could not be motivated to, I hate to use the word plant, but plant is the word I'm thinking of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why do we trust their account?
Why do we trust their
account?
Yeah, there were no thug pictures of him.
Why do we trust their account? How are they able to shape? I'm always concerned when people can shape a story to fit a certain narrative without bothering to inject the facts. And I take you know what? I'm not convinced about a lot of things about that story, and we haven't seen a lot of justice without other parties being involved. We've still got questions on what happened to Bobby Tolan, the young man here in Bel Air, who was shot in front of and left for dead, miraculously survived and is recovered, but was in his own car in his own driveway. They tried to say and imply things again, and in this sort of this prevailing phrase, well, he didn't respond to commands. What commands do you have to have in your own house? And why is it that we, as people of color, are often young people as well, on the receiving end of commands? You rarely hear anybody say, we commanded a 55-year-old white man to do something and he didn't do it. So the militaristic tone and the prevailing framework of trying to make the victim and frame him in a certain way disturbs me a lot. I'm disturbed.
Yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
Well, I mean, we're seeing the usual narrative attempts, right? Like the usual shaping play out right now. So the powers that be come out and, anything that they can put out there, right? He had marijuana once in 6th grade. He stole a piece of bubble gum, whatever it is that can be injected into the story that wasn't previously in the narrative that can now be used to defend power against, in its attempt to basically perpetrate an injustice. And we see it happen over and over and over again. I'm wondering if in the minds of the people who are spinning right now and in the minds of the people over at DPD, if they think that she's just going to walk and if they think that that's going to happen with no reaction.
Of course they do.
Absolutely. To add insult to injury, she was quickly booked and released.
In another county.
Released. She was
out.
Allowed to turn herself in. She was allowed so many luxuries that we don't get. The officer in the tragic Bobby Tolan case he was back on patrol. Officer Cotton, you were back on patrol after this deadly encounter. And this was not her first questionable encounter. She had one, the officer involved in DPT case, she had one in May of 2017 in which she shot someone because they did not respond to verbal commands and were not, and she felt in danger for her life. So, I mean, we would be wrong to not look at the fact that in her short time on the force, there's a history there. When you can't go 15 months in between having deadly or near deadly shootings, and there are officers, law enforcement officers who have been on the beat 30 years and never had to pull their guns. We got to take a long, hard look at her record of community policing.
Sure. How did we get here is a big question, right? And there's a lot that obviously plays into it behind, there's systemic inequalities that play into it. But in addition to that, sometimes I just get sad when I talk to a criminal lawyer, right? Criminal defense attorney, where they outline everything for you and they say, no, according to state statute, they're legally covered. This was legal. And then you start wondering, how did the most traditional philosophical definition of murder become legal under a state statute or American law? And it's like the guy crawling on the ground in California, and he had to reach back to pull his pants up. And so by law, if an officer has to make a split-second decision, right, then he has legal coverage. But he got the guy to get down on the ground and crawl on all fours in the first place. Right. So, making it abusing someone and making them jump through hoops gives you legal cover on the back end. How do we get this whole process so twisted?
We've taken a focus on social justice in my couple of my classes this semester, and one of the things I remind my students is that the Ku Klux Klan was started as a quasi law enforcement agency. It was started to, in fact, help plantation owners to marshal up their common resources to make sure that slaves did not escape. Were that to be the case, I said to myself, then why did we need them after slavery was abolished? Well, then if they went in after they started doing that to make sure that people of color stayed in their place. And the term Ku Klux Klan comes from the sound that you get when a rifle is clocked. It's a very, especially those primitive rifles of the time. And so when you see the Ku Klux Klan, when you see the Texas Rangers, which were kind of, again, a quasi kind of military style militia that were originally there to protect the rights of the colonizers here in Texas, and unfortunately to keep the indigenous people in their place, then we have a long, long history of people of color being on the wrong side of law enforcement in so many ways. And even when we're in the system, are we treated the same? I mean, history tells us no.
Yeah. You listen to Access Houston. We got the political roundtable going on. We've got 4 minutes left before we wrap this up. Let's we got an election coming up. Midterms. One of the guys who is really the star of this Senate race that is right here in Texas with Beto O'Rourke and Ted Cruz. Beto is making some ground. I mean, I'm seeing him on the national platform. We just hope that, as Genesis and I were talking off air, he's doing his part. We hope that we got to do our part. The talk around Beto, how they're saying, he's this Kennedy-esque type of candidate. First of all, how do you all feel about this race, and are you a fan?
Go ahead.
I mean, people haven't seen a competitive Senate race in the state of Texas in a very, very long time.
Lord, absolutely.
And now we see one that kind of defies traditional campaigning. It's not what we're used to seeing. So it's up in the air. It's up in the news cycle. And, I mean, we'll see what kind of turnout we're going to see. But it's also September, and we're about to see a dogfight.
That's right. There you go. That's right. So midterms get so easily overlooked when it comes to turnout, and that's how they slip in so many things that cause the disenfranchised, so much more difficulty. I mean, this race is being watched so carefully all around the country, because as goes Texas, as they say, goes the United States. And if they can turn this state around, I have to say that he's a strong candidate. His fundraising has been most impressive. His average donation is about $33, as opposed to his candidate, the incumbent, who traditionally leans on PAC money. And I think that if individual donors care that much to make him be able to raise money for an incumbent Republican senator in Texas, then that's got to be raising some eyebrows over there. And now we see some last minute attempts at smearing and dragging up old things. And so far he's taken on all comers, and the very grassroots approach, going to every county. I mean, it's a really impressive, very Obama-esque way to go about it, and that's what this state will need.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Great candidate, from personality to drive, ambition, all the things we want to see, especially like when millennials are looking at that, because we're very like, let's get in there and do it. We're grassroots, like she said. And the other side has their way of doing things, and they've been pulling out their bag of tricks. And I think he said, okay, I'm going to roll up my sleeves, and I got some tricks for you, too. Again, it's just going to be up to us to show up and show out. And win or lose, I think now people are starting to understand the importance of starting now and not waiting to a presidential election. Right. So hats off to him just for that anyway.
Yeah, because this, as it was so wisely said, this may be the last real election as we know it. If we don't, pay attention. We didn't get into that, but we will next week. But we have to tell you, listen, if you are not registered to vote, you need to go ahead and do your part. The deadline to register to vote is October the 9th. October the 9th is the deadline to register to vote. Early voting here in Harris County begins on October 22nd through November the 2nd. That's when early voting starts, October 22nd through November 2nd. And then Super Tuesday is on Tuesday, November the 6th. So I know that's a lot that I just threw at you. The most important one that you need to focus on right now, if you are not registered to vote, is that deadline to register to vote, which is October the 9th. So get that done first, and then so we can be ready for November and whatever information you may need about, where to vote, where do I need to go, what steps do I need to take, how many IDs do I need,
Sure.
Do I need to bring, some hair in a plastic bag in order for me to vote? All of that will be, harrisvotes.org, harrisvotes.org. Panel, thank you guys for coming. I hope you guys will come back.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for listening to Access Houston.